We are continuing our amazing off-the-chain series, The Gospels, where we're going through the Gospels in chronological order. And today, we are continuing that story, and we are going to be in Luke chapter 6, which is going to be a primary passage, and Matthew chapter 10. So Luke chapter 6, we're only going to read 17 through 19, and in Matthew, we're only going to read one verse. So you guys, if you have your Bibles, please open to them. And if not, it should be on the screen. And I'm going to start reading. Verse 17. And then Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place. And there was a large crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled by unclean spirits were being cured. And all the people were trying to touch him because power was coming from him and healing them all. We just read about giving, that there was a crowd of people that were needing something from Jesus. And we find ourselves a bit earlier, because what we read happens a little bit later, but we find the same thing with people trying to get close to Jesus because they need something from Jesus. Now, let's be honest. How many of us go to Jesus in too many cases because we need something from him? Raise your hands. Every person, just say, yes, that's me. Do twice. If you didn't raise your hand, it's because you had to raise two hands. I get it. A lot of times we come to Jesus because we need something. And you know what? Let me tell you, that there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing bad about that. Jesus is prepared for your need. Before we even read this, remember a couple weeks ago, what happened? Before the crowds ever came to Jesus, Jesus spent all night praying because he's about to pick his disciples. He's about to pick those, not even his disciples, but his apostles, those that he's going to prepare to send. He prayed all night as he was preparing to choose the people that are going to establish and carry on what he has started. And out of the place of intimacy, he chose some crazy lunatics, as we heard about a couple weeks ago. Peter, that we just read, he's the loudmouth. He's just whatever, right? Andrew, the real quiet, subtle person. Matthew, the tax collector that everyone hated, right? Remember Judas, also an interesting pick. There was another person, an extreme zealot named Simon. So the group of people that Jesus picked was primarily not qualified to do anything that Jesus really needed them to do. And most of them were not polished. But those are the ones that God chose, which is amazing, because if God can take people who are a mess and turn them into something amazing, then it's not a big deal for him to take 5 loaves and 2 fish and turn them into something grand. Like, that's the theme, that doesn't matter what you have. If you give it to God, he can make much of it. And for some reason, we have begun to believe a lie that if we release it, we will lose it. But the truth is that no, if you don't release it, you will lose it. If you release it, God will multiply it. It may not be in the way that you wanted, or the way that you've expected, or the way that you've set up your life to do. And God, like we read, before he told Andrew earlier in the giving, before he told Andrew or asked him what should we do, he already knew what he wanted to do. I said this a few weeks ago, that for some reason I'm just like really entertained by the Criminal and Law channel on YouTube, where they basically go and you see the body cam footage of people that are brought into questioning. And they read your Miranda rights, right? And they sit down and they talk with you, and they do all of these things to set you up. And when you don't know what's going on, you know, especially if you don't know what's going on with the story, everything's fresh. And so for me, when I'm watching this, I'm always like cheering for the person, you know, because they're in the room, they're already in a trap. Immediately, they're already in a trap. The room is super cold, so they're uncomfortable. They let them stay there for hours just to make him very antsy. and so they can question them. And they don't come in telling them everything they know. They already know enough, which is why they brought them in. So I'm just gonna give you guys a piece of advice, that if you ever get brought into an interrogation for any reason, whether you're guilty or not, just say, I need to talk to a lawyer. That's it. And people say, well, if you're asking for a lawyer, you're guilty. The cops do their job. I love them, amazing. I would do the same thing. But if you're on the other end, lawyer. And then Jesus, lawyer and Jesus. But my point is this, that no matter what the story is, no matter how, as they're beginning to question the person in this interrogation room, my heart is always going out to them. Oh, there's some sort of misunderstanding. There's something, and you kind of, they lead you, and then halfway through, they begin to unpack the things that they already know that's going on. So you're talking, you're lying, you're doing all this, but they already know. And I know it may not be the greatest of examples, but this is what we see with Jesus. Jesus already knows what he's about to do. So with whatever you think you're bringing to Jesus, he already knows that you have that issue. He was just waiting on you to bring it to him and for you to suspend how is it that Jesus is going to meet your need. Because we will never be able to guess. You look at the apostles, completely crazy pick. But because he picked the people that we would not pick, it puts us in a position that God can call us and does call us whenever we are not perfect, whenever we are disqualified, whenever we made up so much mess in our lives that we have concluded that the mess is our last chapter. Like, this should spark hope that if God can choose them, knowing them, and can use them, then you and I are definitely up for grabs. And not only that, he calls you and I. Even right now, he's calling you and I. But here's an interesting thing in how Jesus calls. When we start reading, and if you read too fast, you'll miss it. In the first portion of verse 8, it says, and then Jesus came down. So after he was on a mountain, he chose his 12 apostles. Then he comes down with his apostles, and he says, and stood on a level place. That's a very important detail, because Jesus has this beautiful encounter and exchange on the mountain, and he's not calling the people up to the mountain. He's coming down from the mountain at their level. You think about what Jesus is doing here. He's showing up in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the chaos. Jesus' presence creates access for people to touch Jesus, to encounter Jesus. And even if all they're coming to Jesus for is selfish because they have a need, they have a sickness, they have a disease, Jesus was not like, hey, all you guys want is just me to do things for you. No, he says, come. He says, come, I know you have a need. I know you have a need. I know you're sick. I know all this. And it's beautiful because he comes to their level. He's not doing it above the people. He's not doing it from a distance. Imagine if he was like, well, I'm God, and let me filter and sift through everything. No, he was like, no. Remember later on in the story where children were trying to come to Jesus and the disciples were trying to guard him? like, hold on, don't touch God. Don't touch Jesus. God forbid something happens to him. So easily you can have a protection team. A security team around Jesus. And Jesus is like, I don't need a security team. I'm gonna walk among the crowd. I'm gonna invite them to touch me. I'm gonna invite them to speak to me. I'm gonna tell them that they have access to me, because that is the heart of God, to meet people where they are. And too often we subconsciously know that, theologically know that, but in practice, sometimes we just want to correct everything, fix everything, and then come to Jesus. Like, I know I do that. It's like, God, let me just straighten out a few things because, the thing, and it's so selfish because you want something from Jesus. So you're like, let me pretend to clean everything up so that I can come to Jesus. But my real desire is because I need something from him. As if he doesn't know that that's what you're doing. He knows that you want something from him. And honestly, you cannot clean up your life enough for him to hear you or to reject you. He invites you. He has set up this relationship so that we can have access to him. This crowd is massive. broken bodies, tormented minds, diseases. There are people who know people, who are known by people. There are others who don't know, and they're just the people that no one would ever pay attention to. All this is a huge crowd. And the kingdom isn't exclusive to a particular group of people who have cleaned themselves up or who have a particular paycheck. No, the kingdom of God is invasive. It breaks the ordinary spaces and touches people's lives. And so it's a beautiful picture that Jesus came to their level. And if Jesus is willing to come down into the messy spaces, what in the world are we waiting for perfection before we encounter Jesus? Why are we waiting for everything to line up in our lives before we take advantage of the access that Jesus has provided? We keep reading in verse 17, the second portion, and there was a large crowd of his disciples. So remember, Jesus had a lot of people following. He had the crowd, and then he had a bunch of his disciples. Remember a few weeks back or a few months back, we was talking about the people that he invited, Philip, follow me, Matthew, follow me, John, follow me. He invited these people to follow him. They became his disciples because they began to follow him. They began to be close with him. They were apprenticing, watching what he's doing, learning. So he had a bunch of disciples, a lot of people who were just following him. And then there's a crowd. And then Jesus goes on the mountain, he prays, and then what happens is he then selects his 12 apostles. So he has apostles, then he has disciples, and then he has the crowd of people. And so this is why it says there was a large crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all of Judea, Jerusalem, and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon, and who had come to hear him, one. So they came to hear from Jesus, not just to receive from Jesus. And even though a lot of people came just to receive from Jesus, there's a story later on where they're following him because he fed them. This story that we read in the beginning with the kid, people are like, hey, we're gonna follow Jesus. And Jesus is like, why, are you here for me just to feed you? And then the Bible says that most of them left and abandoned him. But it's beautiful here because they come to receive internally, to hear from Jesus, even though maybe that is how they would get their needs met. They first had to sit. Jesus, you talk, great, now heal me. That's fine. Jesus still invites those. But when you're hearing the truth from Jesus, especially when you've been hearing so many lies about your life, about your future, when then all of a sudden there's truth opens your heart. And so Jesus is not just performing miracles, and Jesus is not doing these things so that people would rally behind him. He's trying to speak life into people. He's trying to speak truth into people so that their hearts would be opened, because once their hearts is opened, then faith is built up. And when faith is built up, it begins to form the inner person. And then healing just flows from that. We read in Romans chapter 10, verse 17, so faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. So even if there are miracles or no miracles, you see the people are hungry for truth, just as they're hungry to have their needs met. And we find ourselves in the same predicament here in 2026. People are hurting for truth. And they're also hurting because they have a lot of needs. So you have all these hungry people, you have desperate people, you have needy people, you have curious people. And like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of us here are walking in life and doing life, and we're just exhausted. We're tired. We're carrying pressure and things that we shouldn't be carrying. Some of the stuff is because you made poor decisions. Some of the stuff is because someone made a decision on your behalf, and now you're in this place where you're just sitting under the pressure and under the weight of this. And so some of us need God to move immediately. We're desperate for him to move. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to pretend to get your life together. You don't have to pretend to set up a story so that you can actually tell God what's really on your mind. Like how much time you waste setting something up. And God's like, I already know. I already know. And it's okay if you just want the power of God without even his voice. It's okay. God will still welcome you, even if that's where you are in life. But there is a problem that every time you want the Lord is because you have a need. And if that's where you are, then you're definitely treating God like a vending machine. You don't want to build a relationship with him. You don't want to know him. You don't want to be obedient to him. You don't want your life to be changed. You don't want transformation. You're just going to do the thing that looks right, or you're only going to reach out whenever there's a real need in your life. And if there is no need, then you're just like doing your own thing. How many of us have found ourselves being in that place where we only relate to God that's need-based? That's the only God that you know is, will he meet my need or no? That's it. What kind of relationship is that? And he will meet your needs. I mean, he will. And he's okay that you come with your needs only. That's okay, because life, I'm telling you, life can hit us really bad a lot of times and we just don't know. But I just want to encourage us not to chase God with what God can do, but also lean into what God is trying to say. And we see this in the crowd. Jesus, they're coming to him to hear what he has to say, but they're also bringing their need to him as well. And so there has to be this shift within our lives that although God can meet us and will meet us, and even right now, because I want to take a second and just pray, not just to read the Bible, but I want to pray together, because I want us to go from God fix my life over and over and over and over again to say, God, form my life. Now, those are two different shifts. And Jesus is not rejecting, all you want me to do is fix my life. That's fine, let me fix but let me also form your life. Because as he forms your life, you will understand that how God fixes things, why he fixes things, why he doesn't fix things until maybe later. Because when you begin to hear his voice, then your perspective will change. Because he wants us to go from distance to hungry for him. And I want to pray just as we are right now. If you just close your eyes, just bow your head so that you're not distracted. If you're in one of these two groups that you feel distant from God this morning, whether you're watching or whether you're in a room, or maybe you are the one who have been showing up, but you're not truly engaging. You're just here because that's the religious and the right thing to do. I just want to just simply pray and have you pray with me and say this in your own words. Just say, Jesus, I don't want to just be around you. I don't want to just present my need to you. I want to encounter you. I want to be formed by you. I want to hear your voice, and I want that truth to transform my heart. All right, verse 19. Verse 19 we read, and all the people were trying to touch Jesus because power was coming from him, healing them all. So there is this assumption that no matter what, that if Jesus shows up, this is gonna be true in every situation. That Jesus is gonna heal everyone, everywhere, every time. Now, for a show of hands, who knows that that is not true in their life? Raise your hand really high. It doesn't mean that you don't want him to. It doesn't mean that he cannot. It means that he does not. I want this to be really clear because people hijack the power of God and create a spectacle out of it. On one end, that this is God's will, that every time this is what's gonna happen, and if it doesn't happen, what's wrong with me? And you're put in this place of like turmoil and bondage, like, I didn't have enough faith, I couldn't believe, and yet we continue to tell people like, oh, well, it's Jesus' will. Yes, Jesus has a lot of will that doesn't come to fruition, like the will that no one perishes. That is also God's will, but he cannot force that on people. This is why it's important that when you come to Jesus for any need that you have, that it will put you in a position of understanding the heart of God whenever you are listening to his voice. When you're not listening to his voice, you don't know who he is, and you just show up and you have this false expectation that if he did it for them in this way, that he's gonna do it for you in this moment and now. And when he doesn't, you're disappointed. And it's easy to put on a religious face and begin to manifest things by thinking positively about these things. That if I don't acknowledge my need, the need won't exist. I'm sorry. Whether you acknowledge your need or not, God will either heal it now or he won't. He'll take it away or he won't. You are not so powerful where if you don't acknowledge something, it's not gonna be there. It's still gonna be there whether you acknowledge it or not. But you just cannot make that your identity. You cannot make that that's who you are. You cannot make that that's the end of the chapter or the end, that doesn't have the final say. He has the final say. So although we read here, we just cannot take everything that we read and apply it to our lives personally. And I'll show you why here in a second. But we see here though, what's beautiful, you have this real dynamic power. This power is explosive, it's active, it's moving. Can you imagine the miraculous power of a multitude of people? 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people, and you see people are getting healed left and right. Demons are being cast out of people where they're being free from turmoil. Can you see the diseases going? Can you see the cripple walking? Can you imagine what kind of chaos, beautiful chaos it is that where Jesus is walking? Everyone that touches Jesus, every sickness is completely healed in this moment right here. What a powerful environment to be in. People were not just observing like, oh, this is cool. They're like, no, I have a need. I need to go to Jesus. I need to go to Jesus. I need to go to Jesus. And every person who touches Jesus gets healed. And Jesus doesn't say, hey guys, next week I'll be here again and I'm gonna touch every person again and heal. How many times could God heal everyone and then be done with it and say, But here we read these beautiful people because people are around Jesus. They're drawing from Jesus and they're seeing the power of Jesus on full display. And here's the thing, just because we don't see this at this level, it doesn't mean that we don't want to. It doesn't mean that we're not hungry for it. It doesn't mean that God cannot or does not do it. He does, but we just can't control what he does, when he does it, how he does it. Like I would love to have an environment where everyone shows up and as soon as you get into the parking lot, you're just healed. And we think that if that happens, then people are definitely gonna come to God. And they don't. Has anybody known a drama person that everything out of their mouth is always a problem? Doesn't matter what, and you help them and you fix them or help to see something in them and they're like, oh yeah, now I get it. Then the next day you're with them, they're complaining about the same thing over and over again. And you can help them again and then you walk away thinking that you've helped them and then you see them again and they're in the same place, I think that's what happens with miracles. You can come back for God to heal you over and over and over and over again. He can, and sometimes he does. But if your heart is distant from him, then no amount of miracles will ever turn your heart to him. He has to come, he can meet your needs, but you have to begin to hear his voice because he's not after healing your body as much as he's after having your heart. Like he would rather us be sick on earth, but that our heart is his, than us to be healed on earth and be far from him. And the beautiful thing about the kingdom, it's here, but it's not fully here. So whenever it's here, whenever it shows up, people do get healed. Diseases are cured. Minds that are tormented are restored. God still does it. And I love that because our job is not to see the outcome or to be responsible for the outcome. Our job is obedience. And our obedience is this, that God has given us the power. He has given us even the authority. And if he says for us specifically to do this, then he will do it. But if you do it on your own accord, then you cannot rely on God to back you up if he didn't tell you to do it. So if God told you, he will do it. But if God didn't tell you, then you're just wanting it from your own heart. And it doesn't mean it's a wrong desire. It just means that God didn't tell you. And if God didn't tell you, he's not obligated to do it. So our job is to be, God, have your way in our life. We want to see, so we're gonna believe, we're gonna pray no matter the results. But honestly, we don't know the results. God will break out in these ways. I've been in environments where people are getting healed left and right. It's amazing. It's stunning. It's beautiful. It's real. But it doesn't happen every time. But we need to be praying that God moves like that more often than not. Like there has to be something that drives in us, that we go after God with everything, all the needs that we have, all the sicknesses that we have. And so you see this beautiful story of like, how long did it take? Like, remember, Jesus is on the mountain praying. He didn't sleep all night. Then he comes and he chooses his 12. And he's probably second guessing himself because these people are crazy. And so as he chooses his 12, he comes down to the level where everyone is at. You have a bunch of his disciples. And then you also have his apostles. And then you have a multitude of crowd. And do you think it took him like an hour to go through the crowd? No. He's probably there just nonstop. Because that's the one thing that we all know, that you will never be in a place where there is no need. No matter how much need Jesus met, no matter how many people Jesus healed, after Jesus resurrected and ascended, the early church that Jesus empowered continued his work of what? Healing and meeting needs. That tells you that Jesus did not heal everyone, but he could have. He did not resurrect everyone from the dead, but he could have. He did not meet all the needs, but he could have, but he didn't. So we're continuing the movement. This is why we will see things like this break out in our churches, in our environments. And they don't have to be as grand as this, but this is amazing. Imagine though, you do something in downtown Asheville and you have thousands of people there and God's just healing every single person. There's something within us that should be like, God, please, I want to see that in my life. But here's the question. Do you want to see that happen? Or do you want to be a part of that happening? Not the same connection with Jesus. And too often we think that just because we want to see it, it's the same as we are being a part of it. And I'm telling you, I've been in places where I was a part of watching God move. And I was in places where I was just observing God move. And both of those are amazing, but I would rather be a part of what God is wanting to do more than just observing. Because when you're a part of what God is doing, you know that the results are not on you, that it's on him. And you're just obedient. And what are you doing? You're faithful, you're obedient, you are in close proximity with him, and we'll get to it here in a second. But there is an element that happens whether you're on this place or on this side, this side or that side. But I just thought it was amazing because a lot of people, even the other spectrum of our church culture in the West is that Jesus doesn't do any miracles. Doesn't really matter because God's sovereign and, just as long as you get to heaven, that's it. And just, we'll pray because we're going to be obedient, but there's no expectation that God is doing anything. And if he does, it's so rare that you may see it a few times in your life. And I'm sorry, that's lame. That's sad and that's lame. I think there's a beautiful medium where you're like, God, we don't see as much as we want to, but our heart craves to see you move in those ways. But what's more important is that we position ourselves to want to see God save more people than he physically heals them. That God reaches our neighbor, our spouses, our children, our friends, our coworkers. What if our desire was to see God transform their heart more than heal their body? Both are important, but we crave for the spectacle more than we crave for God forming someone. Because when God is forming someone, it's gonna take a while for you to see the result of what God is doing in their life. Just like it's taking a while for people to see the result of what God is doing in your life. But you see this crowd, you will always have people who are just showing up to receive from Jesus and they want nothing more. Then you have people who are just disciples of Jesus and they're learning from him. But then there are people who are like, I want to be a part of what Jesus is doing. And that's where I hope we land. Okay, this last verse. because we move from this story, and this is the tail end of it. And here's what's amazing. Next week, we're going to talk about the Sermon on the Mount. Because familiar sermon, the Beatitudes, blessed are, blessed are, blessed. This is all leading up to it. So they came to hear Jesus. He's speaking with them. We don't know what he says before he's healing people, but he's healing, he's touching them. Everyone is just like, the buzz is, look what Jesus is doing. I mean, you talk about the word of mouth traveling so fast. It's crazy. So you have this grand, crowd of people that eventually is where Jesus begins to teach them. But here's the thing that I just want to give you a little bit of a glimpse. Jesus was not teaching the crowds the Beatitudes. We have this image where Jesus gets in the mountain and you see him and everyone's sitting and he's like, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. That's not what happened. And we're going to unpack it next week. Verse 1 in Matthew chapter 10, we read this crazy line. Like when I read this, I was like, oh God, this is insane. Jesus, so after he did all this, he then summoned his 12 disciples. So his disciples and apostles, you can use them, he summoned those 12 that he chose. They're watching him do all this stuff. Right? He's doing all this stuff. They're watching him. They're chosen and they're observing Jesus work. A beautiful lesson. How do you expect God to do something through you when you're never in the room for him to work where you can see him work? We want God to do something. When was the last time you seen God do something? When was the last time you positioned yourself to see God do something? Jesus over here, he gathered his apostles, his 12. He's walking through this, and this is not the first time he did this. They were already watching and observing. So they're in this place of being with Jesus, walking with him, learning from him, seeing all these amazing things. And then we read this crazy verse, Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus then summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal the word, every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Now, this is where it kind of gets a bit uncomfortable because I just said a minute ago that he did this and everyone, and it was Jesus, but now we see something amazing happen that he calls his 12 and says, I just healed every disease. Now I'm going to give you authority to heal every disease. You can't just say that and want that. There has to be an evidence that that's actually happening. But because we are so starving for miracles and for God to use us in this way, we take this verse and we self-apply it. Well, if Jesus told them, he's obviously telling me, really? I want that to sit because, okay, who wants this to be in their life? Every hand, every hand. Imagine if God told you, hey, Sue, hey, Henry, hey, whomever, Joe, whatever, John, I'm giving you authority to heal every disease. That's very different than us wanting the authority to heal every disease. Because if you only want that authority, you won't see the results that you're expecting. But if God gives you that authority, what he says will happen. So what's interesting is this. It is possible where you can show up and God will heal every disease and every sickness. I want that to be in your mind that it is possible that you can show up to a space, to a room, that God will heal everything in the room. It is possible that God can show up in your life and heal everything in your life and make you completely healthy. It's possible. And we say, God, please do it. Please have your way in that way where everyone who shows up, and why? so that they will know you. And Jesus is like, they won't know me. I'll heal better yet, I will die and resurrect. And even after I die and resurrect, people will still doubt. And if you think that God ought to heal everything in your life, then you will be walking disappointment when he hasn't healed everything in your life. And if he hasn't healed everything in your life, you may think like, well, why would he heal anything in my life? You see how the lie goes from, it's either all or nothing. And God's like, what about I'll give you some now, I'll give you some later, and eventually, when the kingdom of God is fully, I'll give you everything. Like, the promises that God has, you have to understand that they will be fulfilled. Every single one of them will be fulfilled. You may not see it in this life, though. I'll give you an example. You guys remember the story of Moses? Now, Moses was asking God for a couple of things. One, Moses was asking God, he's like, let me see your face. Like, show me your face, Lord. Show me your face. And God said, no. But you can see my back. Moses wanted to go to the promised land. And God's like, no. Great desires. But later on, remember at the Mount of Transfiguration, who was with Moses? Who was with Jesus? And he was talking to God face to face. All of God's promises will come to fruition. They will come to pass. So we have to understand, is something that we're reading, is it prescriptive of something that's happening, and it applies to us? So we immediately take that and say, this is prescribed to me, or is it descriptive of something that God did? Because Jesus specifically called out 12, and he told these 12 only. Jesus had a bunch of other disciples there. He had a bunch of people. He never told them to go out and heal everyone. He didn't even tell his disciples to. He just told his 12. This is why it is critical for us to desire to hear his voice more than to see his miracle on display. It is more important because when we hear God, then when God asks us to do something, then it's gonna be our responsibility to obey. Because later on we read that he sent them out 2 by 2, remember? He sent them out 2 by 2. Why? It wasn't just like, hey, I'm gonna give you authority. Yay, all right, awesome. Now go. Without me. They're with Jesus doing all these things, and then later on he's like, now you go without me. Are you ready to go? Or you just want to observe and be in the crowd? And I think that's the challenge as I wrap up this morning. Are you guys still good? I just want to, this coming Communion Friday or Communion Sunday that we're going to do in a few weeks on May 24th, we're going to specifically pray for God to touch us physically, for healing, for any diseases or sicknesses that you may have. Just be praying towards that day. We're going to dedicate and we're going to pray for healing, for miracles, for all these things on the 24th. You definitely don't have to wait to pray until then, but we're going to be building and have expectation and faith for God to touch us in this way on the 24th for Communion Sunday. But we see that you have two contrasts. You have in Luke 6, what we started reading, that people are receiving. The crowd is receiving. The disciples are receiving. Even the apostles are receiving. But then in Matthew 10, we see that God is sending people. And here's like the 3-part that I want to share with you guys. And we need to identify where we are in these 3 places. It's, if you will, like a spiritual progression, right? So the first step is you come to Jesus. Some of us have come to church but never come to Jesus. have to come to Jesus. You have to show up however way you show up, even if it's because you have a need. Just come to Jesus. But you can't just come to Jesus. The second part is that you have to come to Jesus and you have to open yourself up to receive from Jesus. I heard someone say, man, I don't want any counseling in my life because I know someone who's a counselor and their life sucks. Their life is a mess. And it's like, that's true. You could be a counselor and your life could be a mess. It doesn't mean that what you study or what you share or what you teach people doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that you don't apply what you know. So if I know all these things and I don't apply them, my life will be a mess regardless of what I know, what I don't know. So we have to receive from Jesus. We have to know what we're wanting to do, what God is wanting to do. We have to sit and we have to receive from Jesus. And then the third thing is that we have to be, and we have to understand that He's going to send us. So He's like, come to me, receive from me, and I will send you. But I find that too many Christians are stuck in the receive from me part. They'll come to Jesus and they'll receive from Jesus. And they'll receive from Jesus. They'll receive from Jesus and receive some more from Jesus. And they cannot wait to receive again from Jesus. And they've decided they don't want to be sent by Jesus. They don't want to be sent by Jesus. They just want to receive from Jesus. They just want to sit at His feet all day, 24/7, just receive, 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 receive. There has to be a point where we're like, we have received enough where we are, God, where are you sending me to? Are you stuck in just receiving, always receiving, never releasing? Jesus does not change our life so that we can just hide away in the cave. This is why He doesn't save you and kill you. He saves you, transforms you, and releases you. And you have to figure out, Jesus, have I received enough to be released? And I guarantee you, you have probably received more than enough to be released. The question is, where is He releasing you? And this is where all of this becomes different, because He's not going to release all of us to the same thing in the same way. For some of us, He'll release you to start something, to launch something, to plow through and provide a pathway or a breakthrough for something. For some of us, it's going to be large things, multiple, places even, or things. Like, it could be it could be different. For some of us, He's just calling you to just be a mother or be a father or just be a husband or a wife. Maybe for some of you, He's just calling you to be a friend to someone that's right in your circle, and you are too busy wanting God to do the miraculous where God has sent you to just be an ear for someone who has just lost all hope. Like, we want God to use us and we dictate how He's gonna send us. But instead of saying, God, I'm gonna continue to receive, I'm gonna continue to come to you, I wanna be sent by you too. It's a different environment, receiving from Jesus and then being sent out by Jesus. He doesn't just give us experiences so that we savor them and swim in them and keep them for ourselves. What you experience, what you encounter with Jesus is meant to be extended to others. And so how do you get to the place where you're like, God, I need to be sent by you? Because even like doing church like this, God's calling us to serve, to be with the kids, to greet people, to serve coffee, to set up things. Like, it may not seem like you're making an impact, and if you think that you're not making an impact, then you're looking at your stuff and you're like, oh, this is not sufficient for the Lord. Me greeting someone is not sufficient for the Lord. Me speaking with them is not sufficient. Me giving financially is not sufficient. It's not limited to just the church, it's limited to your life. Me talking with a person is not sufficient. And God's like, what are you doing? So here's the thing. I want to call each and every person in this room or those who are watching. Start by doing these 3 things. Again, it's the simplicity of them that we could dismiss as not a big deal. But if you step into them, you will see God move in your life and through your life. So the first one is commit some time with the Lord. Surprise! It takes time to get to know the Father's heart. Come to Him. Spend time with Him. Number 2, commit to growing with Him. Invite Him to begin to do things in your life. Begin to start saying no to things that you used to say yes to. Allow God to chip away things that have been keeping you from committing to the things of the Lord. Commit to being taught and shaped by Him. And then open your life up to be a God, send me. And I know that's a very scary question or a very even scary posture because you don't know where God's gonna send you, what that's gonna look like. For some of you, He's gonna ask you to walk away from your jobs, maybe to walk away from your city, to walk away from your friends, to walk away from what you're consuming online. And maybe He's gonna send you to somewhere where you don't even wanna go. And it's not even Africa, it's your neighbor. It's your coworker. It's your child. You know, you have to lay down that you want better for your life than He does. You have to lay that down. And then you have to just commit to saying yes to Him, no matter where it leads you or to what He's gonna call you. And so this is prayer simple. I want everyone to just close their eyes. We're just gonna sit here with the Lord for 1 minute. And just the prayer is simple, just Jesus, make me bold. Make me bold to begin to say no to things so that I can find time to spend with you. Give me boldness to come to you without pretense, even with my needs, but not just to come to you with my needs. Give me boldness to invite you to have your way in my life. And you just remain just talking with God because you have one of 3 options here. You're either gonna stay in the crowd, which you'll always have need and you'll just be bringing need to Jesus, or you can become His disciple and allow Him to form you, or you can also step into the crowd that is sent, which then God will authorize you to release the power that He has given you. Don't just admire what Jesus did or is doing. Step into what He's wanting to do. Because you and I weren't saved to just sit on a chair and absorb and receive. We were saved to go, so that as you and I go, God through you. So Jesus, as we pause here, we ask that you speak to your people. God, I ask you to speak to each and every heart in this room. God, we've learned so much from you. There's so much truth. We've experienced you. We've encountered you. And maybe at times we just have grown stale to the things because we are not going anywhere. We're just sitting and staying. God, I ask you to nudge your people so that we can understand that what you give us, what you reveal to us, is never meant just for us, but for us to take into the world that also needs your light, your truth, your hope, your freedom. And Jesus, I ask that you move in this room.